For the past 2 decades or so, Iran has had a sort of political stranglehold on Iraq, where militias loyal to Tehran have played a key role in Iran's proxy network. However, in recent months, Iraq's government, previously seen as one of Iran's few remaining allies, has taken pains to distance itself from Tehran. So, in this video, we're going to explain why Iraq is ditching Iran, and why Iran might be less fussed about it than you'd expect. Never miss a major news story by listening to the Daily Briefing, TLDR's daily rundown of everything you need to know. Listen along in your favourite podcast app or by clicking the link in the description. So, to understand how and why Iran first gained influence in Iraq, we need to go back to 1980 and the Iraq-Iran War. Iraq and Iran had a series of long-running border disputes, including over the Shatt al-Arab, a waterway on the southern end of the border that Iraq had ceded to Iran in 1975 as part of the Algiers Agreement. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Saddam Hussein, the Sunni Muslim leader of Iraq, got worried that the new Iranian regime might try to expand into Iraq and reassert control over the Shatt al-Arab. So, in 1980, while Iran was preoccupied with the aftermath of the revolution, Iraq invaded Iran. Originally, Iraq made significant territorial gains and the campaign looked to have been a success. However, once the Iranian regime found its feet, the tide turned. Over the next few years, Iran began to push back, and by 1982, Iran had regained all of its lost territory, essentially leaving both sides back where they started. There was then a brief attempt at peace negotiations, and the UN Security Council passed Resolution 514 calling for a ceasefire between the two sides. But Iran ultimately ignored the resolution and launched a retaliatory invasion. When it started to look like Iran might actually defeat Iraq, Arab and Western countries stepped up support to Saddam, because they didn't want the Ayatollahs controlling both Iran and Iraq. The war quickly settled into a stalemate, and in 1988, the two sides finally agreed to a UN-brokered ceasefire, with diplomatic relations restored in 1990. Things remained relatively stable until the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. The Iraqi government collapsed, and Saddam himself was captured in 2004, then executed in 2007. At the time, America thought they'd be able to turn Iraq into a flourishing democracy, and hopefully the Iraqis would then elect a pro-American government in Baghdad. Unfortunately for Washington, that's not how things turned out. Iraq collapsed into sectarian infighting between Shia and Sunni Muslims. Its politics entered a state of permanent dysfunction, and the US withdrew from Iraq less than a decade later. This created a power vacuum, which was promptly filled by Iran. Iran has infiltrated most of Iraq's political class, and more than a dozen political parties and a number of paramilitary groups in Iraq have ties to Iran. Even the US reluctantly recognizes this fact. A report published by the US Army in 2018 admitted that an emboldened and expansionist Iran appears to be the only victor of the Iraq War. There were essentially 3 reasons that Iran wanted influence in Iraq. First, and most importantly, Iran wanted to avoid a repeat of the Iran-Iraq War by guaranteeing that any future Iraqi government would be friendly to Tehran. Second, Iran wanted to fold Iraq into its proxy network, which had developed throughout the 80s and 90s and could be used to harass or intimidate Iran's enemies. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq regularly attacked US troops in the region, and control over Iraq created a land corridor connecting Iran to Bashar al-Assad's Syria, Iran's main regional ally, and then onto Hezbollah in Lebanon. Third, Iran was able to use Iraq to evade sanctions, both via using Iraq as a middleman for exports and via influence over Iraq's banking system, which helped Iran get its hands on foreign currency. However, over the past couple of years, Iran's influence in Iraq has been waning. This trend began in the late 2010s, when young Iraqis began protesting Iran's apparent overbearing influence in the country, but it's accelerated in recent months. This became overwhelmingly apparent during Iran's brief war between Israel and America last month, when the Iraqi government, which is led by Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani and his coordination framework, a coalition that used to be closely aligned with Iran, offered little more than muted rhetorical support, and Iran-backed militias refrained from carrying out substantial attacks on US troops stationed in Iraq. Pro-Iran parties are also expected to do poorly in Iraq's next parliamentary election, which is due for November. One of the biggest parties within the ruling coalition has already said they won't participate, presumably in anticipation of a bad result, while the electoral success of anti-Hezbollah candidates at Lebanon's elections earlier this year suggests widespread public antipathy towards Iran across the region. So, why is this? Well, Iraq is distancing itself from Iran for at least two reasons. First, it's in part a response to popular pressure. Most Iraqis think Iran has too much influence in the country, and are worried about being dragged into a confrontation with Israel or the US. With elections fast approaching, even traditionally pro-Iran groups will want to avoid looking like Tehran's lapdogs. But second, the past year or so has demonstrated that Iran is not as powerful or reliable a patron as was once supposed. The fact that Iran wasn't able to stop Israel from degrading Hezbollah and Hamas will have made pro-Iranian groups in Iraq nervous, given they essentially rely on Iran to protect them in the event of direct confrontation with Israel or the US. This would explain why Iraq didn't really do much to help Iran during last month's war, and also why the Iraqi government has made a number of quiet concessions to the US recently. In January, Iraq withdrew an arrest warrant for Donald Trump issued during his first term, agreed to release Princeton researcher Elizabeth Surkov, who's been held hostage by Hezbollah, and passed a vital budget amendment that has long been sought by Iraq's Kurds, the segment of Iraqi society that has the closest ties to the US. But it's also worth mentioning that this drifting apart isn't being resisted as strongly by Iran as you might expect. This is in part because Iran's proxy network was previously organised by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which has been thrown into disarray by Israel's assassinations of their senior leadership. But it's also because the Ayatollahs have realised that its proxy network has become a political risk domestically. Many Iranians resent the fact that Tehran has spent billions maintaining an apparent impotent proxy network, while ordinary Iranians slip into poverty, and don't buy into the Ayatollah's rhetoric about some transnational Islamic revolution. This became apparent in late 2023, when hundreds of Iranians chanted for the removal of Palestinian flags at a football game in Tehran. Anyway, the Ayatollahs have apparently recognised this, which is why they've lent into Iranian nationalist themes recently. The Ayatollahs were previously wary of explicit displays of nationalism, both because they see themselves as the leaders of a transnational project intended to spread their version of Shiite Islam throughout the world, and because they worried that nationalist sentiment could be hijacked by opposition political groups. However, in the past month or so, the Ayatollahs have suddenly lent into nationalist themes. Murals of figures from Persian folklore have popped up around Tehran, and Ayatollah Ali Khamenei surprised almost everyone when, in his first public appearance after nearly a month in hiding, he requested a rendition of A Iran, a nationalist song that's become popular since the war. All in all, even if this nationalist pivot is just a desperate attempt to shore up support and overlook Iran's diplomatic isolation, if it eases the Iran-Iraq split, that's no bad thing. As you may know already, here at TLDR we're committed to learning about the world around us, and helping you do the exact same. Luckily for all of us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, helps with just that. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker and problem solver, with thousands of visual, interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. Not only does Brilliant offer a perfect mix of engaging problems and competitive features, it also keeps you motivated with daily encouragement, and their app makes it easy to learn wherever you are. Instead of mindless scrolling, with those extra pockets of time you find in the day, you can give your mind a workout with Brilliant's growing collection of programming courses. From learning Python to developing an intuition for computer logic, you'll get hands-on experience with real programs and learn to think like a programmer, building your problem-solving skills to thrive in the evolving world of programming. Plus, all content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers and professionals from Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Microsoft, Google and more. To start your learning journey and try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR. Scan the QR code on your screen, or you can click the link in the description. By doing so, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know that you came from us, which really helps us out.